All right, here's some basic questions for you.
Before you do that, why don't you tell me today's date and who he is?
Well, that's part of the basic questions.
Oh, okay.
All right, well, what year were you born?
1927.
And how old are you now?
93.
And what year is it now?
2020.
Nice. All right, so now, what historical events do you remember most in your life?
When I was born.
Well, the World War,
Mm-hmm.
probably the one I remember the most.
Mm-hmm.
3 children born,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, I had things in high school that I enjoyed. It
Mhm.
wasn't all that great, but I
Mhm.
enjoyed things.
Oh yeah.
What other world events do you remember in your lifetime? That
World
affect-
events,
So, do you remember the Kennedy assassination?
yeah,
Where were you on that day?
I don't know.
We were eating lunch. I came
You were
home from
home.
kindergarten or
Yeah,
somewhere, and
that's
we were
right.
eating lunch.
That's right. We
He
were,
was
weren't
sick.
We were in the den or that little side room in there watching TV.
Mm-hmm. The old garage.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, what about 9/11? Do you remember that? You don't.
Where the trade centers were bombed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, New York City got bombed.
I know, but I don't remember where I was.
That's all good. What are the biggest differences of today compared to when you were a child?
I'm 100 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't get around as good, huh?
No, I can't get around as good.
What about technology or?
Well, the world is just totally different than
Mhm.
when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
We had very little airplane transportation. I saw airplanes develop as, transports and taking people and goods and so forth. When I first started, the airplane basically was just something that somebody flew around, We used to go out the airport in Pebble, which was by the fairgrounds,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd ride with people that had airplanes out there. And there weren't many. There were one guy had a double wing red Stearman, and I just really wanted to ride in that. Never got to. And my mother said, "You don't go to the airport. You bother those people." And I did bother.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fascinated with flying,
Mm-hmm.
although I never took flying lessons or any of that. I knew I couldn't pass a physical at that time. It was very strict
Mm-hmm.
to get a flying license when I was growing up. You had to really be almost perfect in sight and everything. And then when I was old enough, I really wasn't that much as interested in it at that time. So I don't know. That's about.
All right. Well, now, what do you remember about your parents? Like, what were they like?
Well, my mom, I never knew my father. I was born in April and he died in February. And he had pneumonia, which in those days was fatal. They did not have penicillin or anything like that to correct the germ that, like pneumonia germs and so forth. So when my dad got pneumonia, it was fatal. We just knew he was going to die. We didn't know when. At least that's what my mother told me. And I don't What was the question?
Oh, what were your parents like?
Well, my mom was my grandparents raised me, so I had two sets of parents. I had Grandma and Grandpa, whose house I lived in, and I had my mother. And my mother worked all the time.
She
But
lived
she-
there too, though.
Huh?
You all lived together.
Yeah, we all lived together in the same house on Pine Street in Pueblo. And they were very kind and very understanding. And I got to say that when I was in high school and so forth, I got to do pretty much what I wanted to do. I tried to be I tried to be what they wanted me to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very cooperative in that respect. They were just very nice people.
All right.
And my granddad did everything he could to make me feel like he was my father. He would help be my father, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we used to go for rides,
Hmm.
and he used to call it Grandpa and Grandson Ride. And we'd go out and talk and visit with each other about things. We always went out by the airport in Pueblo at that time. It was on the other side of the fairgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't much out there except prairie.
Yeah.
And we'd sit out there and talk. And I was very, I thought quite a bit of my granddad. And my grandmother was that person who was always concerned things weren't going to go right. She was a worrier.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom took things.
That's your dad, then.
Yeah, that's my dad. You seen him?
Oh yeah, I've seen the pictures. So now, what were you saying about your grandma?
My grandmother was always concerned I was going to get in trouble. And I didn't know. I said, Grandma, I'm a good boy. I don't get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you just have to, one foot goes the wrong way and you're in trouble. And she just raised Ned with me because she wanted me to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And she used to just do all kinds of things to make sure I did what was right and what was expected of young boys and young men.
Mm-hmm.
And but I loved them both. I loved my mom and my grandparents. And we got along pretty well.
Hmm.
And my grandpa was a deputy sheriff, so
Mm-hmm.
I didn't dare get picked up any place because I was in trouble if I did.
Oh yeah. So now, how has Colorado changed from when you were growing up?
Oh, you just can get every place.
Yeah.
You used to not be able to go
They
from
don't
here
have
to
like
there
riots or
Well, I said,
very
I
easily, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I said, so how many?
And Grandpa was warden of the county jail,
Mm-hmm.
The protests.
so he and Grandma couldn't go very much, very often, because
Mhm.
he had to be on duty at the
It's
jail.
not
Mm-hmm.
They lived in the front end of the jail.
less than-
There was
it's
living
1%.
quarters for the warden and then the jail
It's
behind.
1%.
It was all one big building.
Hmm.
And I remember when I was about Coleman's age, maybe a little older, they had a door that went from
comment.
my grandparents' living quarters,
Mhm.
which was the door was in the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
into the what they called the bullpen in the jail. That's where the
Mm-hmm.
convicts roamed around and sat down, talked to each other and so forth,
Mhm.
you know. And I'd sit at that door, and it had rails,
Hmm.
and then had a real fine mesh of fence screen on it, so you couldn't pass things through.
Hmm.
And I'd sit there and visit with those convicts,
Mm-hmm.
and Grandma used to say, "There's going to teach you bad things." And I said, "Well, I got to learn somewhere."
That's a start.
So anyway, I used to sit there and visit with those convicts,
This-
Mhm.
After
And,
Florence funeral in Texas,
had quite an experience with Grandpa in the jail. With Grandpa worked being the deputy sheriff and warden of the jail. It took, I guess it was about 9 years that he was at, 8 or 9 years. And other than that, I grew up in what we call the Minnequa Heights, which was out south of Corwin Hospital, if you know where that is.
I'm done.
And in fact, Aunt Nancy lived out there. That's in some part of your life. And pretty much had things the way I wanted them. And if I didn't do something really drastic bad, my parents never made me do something, you know. In fact, I was envious of some kids in the neighborhood because their parents were stricter than my parents were.
Yeah.
But we had just a different relationship with parents than, you know, and I enjoyed growing up. I really did.
So now, how has the world changed from when you were growing up?
Totally different with everything. Used to be the only way you could get to Denver was on a train.
Really?
Didn't even have buses when I first started growing up.
You had trolleys. You had trolleys.
Between here and Denver, though.
Oh.
And we had cars, but they were 1929, 1930 cars. They weren't built to go a long ways.
Yeah.
And they didn't have inflated tires. They had solid tires on them. So the rough riding was a little rougher. But I had an aunt and uncle, a great aunt and great uncle that lived in Denver. They were my grandma Lloyd's sister and her husband. And my sister Esther and I used to go up there every summer and spend a week with them.
And then look at this.
And I made some real good friends up there in the period that I went up there. And where you girls are going?
We're going to go inside for a minute.
And I don't know, I just, things just kind of grew up and in place.
So now, who have been your favorite and your least favorite presidents of your time?
Well, I think Eisenhower.
How come Eisenhower?
Oh, I don't know. I looked at him as an authority. And I had a lot of confidence in him. Of course, I'd been in the war under his command.
Oh, yeah.
And so I had a lot of respect for him. And my parents died in the war Republicans. So FDR, who was probably went down in history as one of the best presidents we ever had, my folks thought he was terrible. And so I didn't get a good attitude about FDR. Other than that, I don't know any other answer to give you.
Yeah. So now, who was your least favorite president?
Um,
Or one of?
I didn't know much about Hoover. Truman was kind of dash. I'd say those two were probably the least that I had respect for. Although I didn't dislike them.
Yeah.
You know, I just didn't think as much about them as I did FDR and Eisenhower and some of those.
All right. So now, what's one of your happiest moments in your life?
When I got married was one,
Yeah.
and when I graduated from college was another one. I always had people say, you're never going to get out of school. You can't go to college, you're not smart enough. I went to college, got my master's degree, and should have had my doctorate, but I was too lazy to write the dissertation. I did everything but that. And but I didn't need it.
Mm-hmm.
I had everything I needed. It was education-wise to do the job I wanted, so I didn't push myself very hard.
Yeah.
And I guess that's about the answer I can give you on that one.
So now, what jobs have you had throughout your life?
Well, I enjoyed being an elementary school principal very much. I was only a teacher in the classroom for 3 years, so I didn't really get a lot of experience for being a teacher. But I was a principal for 18 years, and I was